needs, you can just contact us and we can help you get set up with those, get linked with those, or find something that can be provided in your area. Our mission is to support families and professionals and to empower individuals with disabilities to reach their full potential. And we do that through supporting, connecting, educating, and empowering families and professionals. Our services include one-on-one family support and advocacy support groups, education workshops with parents and professionals, professional development, community outreach, developmental screening, family behavior support, and eligibility navigation. So if you think that your child may have a disability or if they're going to have a disability and you want to help get them enrolled in OPWGD services, we can help you with that. Or if your child doesn't have a disability and you just need another parent to talk to, or you need some support navigating various systems, we can also help you with that. Follow us on social media. Post lots of things. We do lots of fundraising, fun events, meat raffles. In a couple of weeks, we're doing a lottery ticket tree raffle. We're like picking different winners every day, so that should be fun. And you can do all of that on social media. And any of these services that you may need, just contact our parent network phone number and we'll get you the right people. But today we're focusing on behavioral development. So throughout the course of the lifespan of a child, what is typical behavior, what might be atypical, when should you be concerned, and a little bit about what you can do about it. I always say, as a behavior intervention specialist, I always tell parents that behavior is communication. So if you think of the definitions of behavior and the definition of communication, and add those together, so the way in which you act or conduct yourself, and the way in which you send or receive information, then the way in which you conduct yourself is the means of sending and receiving information. For anyone who has children with or a child with a disability who might communicate non-verbally, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. Or if you have a very small kid, maybe hasn't developed a lot of language yet. If they pull on your pant leg, if they point at an apple, if they walk up to you or push their sibling away from a toy, they're communicating something. So we have some examples here to help illustrate that. So if a 2-year-old is throwing their food, what are they trying to tell you? They're trying to communicate something. Maybe they're saying they don't like it. Maybe they have a stomachache. Maybe they like the way it feels. So there's lots of different things that they may be communicating. If a 15-year-old slamming the door, it might mean they're mad. It might mean they got in an argument with a friend. It might mean that they are upset with their parents. It might mean that they are embarrassed about something. And this applies to anyone of any age. If you're 40 years old and you're updating your resume, that might mean you don't like your job. It might mean that you had a bad day at work. It might mean that you heard ladies talking in the bathroom about doing a bunch of layoffs. Who knows? It could mean a lot of things. But all behavior is a form of communication. So if you're a 4-year-old and you're pushing your classmate, maybe they're not sharing. Maybe you don't want to share with them. Maybe you don't like them. And if you're a 17-year-old and you're skipping school, maybe it's because you didn't study for your test. Maybe you received some peer pressure. Maybe you're getting bullied. Maybe you're just really tired and you don't want to go to class on that day. So all behavior is communication. Does that make sense? All right. So when we talk about stages of development and behavior, there's 5 different categories and 5 different stages. So there's cognitive, which is learning and thinking type of development, motor development, which is physical development, motor development, social, emotional, and then speech, which is language, communication, sign language, sending and receiving information. The stages are very small, newborn babies, infants, toddlers, preschool age, school age, and then preteen and teen. Can I ask, are you ladies, are you parents?
Mhm.
What ages are your kids? Okay, okay. So maybe we will spend more time on, and this gentleman has younger kids, so maybe we don't get too much into the teen stuff today. We want to focus more on what's really just to your guys' kids. So when we look at newborns, babies, and infants, and break down these 5 categories, and what is some typical behavioral development? So a very small child, a newborn and infant, will be able to follow items with their eyes. If you have like a fun blinking toy, they'll be able to follow it. When they see food, a bottle, they might open their mouth. When they're done eating, they might close their mouth. So these are all observable behaviors that you can see in your child that helps to communicate something to you. Physical and motor, they might kick, they might reach towards objects, they might grip, they grab your finger, super cute. They might push their front part of their body up with their arms. They might roll over, sit up, stand. Socially, they're smiling, they're laughing, especially with people that they know. They might be afraid of strangers. They will most likely have several different facial expressions, not nearly to the same extent that adults have, but a child does emote through nonverbal communication just like an adult does. It's just, they don't have a brow to furrow when they're frustrated, but, you can definitely tell if a child is happy or sad. Emotionally, they'll be calm when they're picked up. They might stop crying when their needs are met. They will cry when their parents leave. That's all stages of emotional development. Speech and language, not a lot of that at the stage of crying, cooing, babbling. As they get close to that 12 months, they might make spontaneous sound production or copying the sounds of other people. When we start getting into any set when you're just asleep, so they probably have most of this stuff down to their toddler years. So using objects as intended. So picking up a cell phone and pretending like you talk to your grandma or grandpa. Using like the pretend food to pretend like they're making a meal in a plastic kitchen. This is also when you're taking first steps, walking. They might be able to feed and drink for themselves with silverware, speak up. They might start climbing on things, especially once they master the walking pretty well. Socially, they're going to copy other people. They're going to show items of interest to you, like, oh, look at this. They want to show you everything they did if they're in pre-K, everything they did at school. They think it's amazing. They want to show everybody. They're engaging in parallel play. They're displaying affection. And yes, that's social and also emotional affection. But they're also slowly increasing their independence. They can maybe sit in a room and play with a toy without being ranked in the same room as mom or dad. So they have a little bit of independence. They are increasing their nonverbal expression of their feelings. But at the same time, they have difficulty with their emotional regulation. So they have what I like to call like big feelings or big emotions. It's the smallest little thing is a huge emotional deal. A kiddo whose house I was just at, he was 4, and his sister didn't want to play with him, and he like went, and he was like throwing a fit, he's screaming, he's hollering, he's crying, and then it ended up, she's potty training, and she had to go to the bathroom, and he made this huge deal out of it, it was a big emotion. In speech and language development, we're looking at multiple syllable words, understanding verbal and nonverbal directives, pointing and gesturing, and then as you continue to age, you have increased speech production and complexity, so multiple word phrases, sentences. And then we do preschool. So we're looking at drawing shapes, awareness of safe, unsafe, touching a hot stove, running in traffic. They can change their behavior based on their environment. So they understand to some degree that if you're at church, you're supposed to sit quiet. If you're in school for circle time and the teacher's reading a book, you sit in your spot and you listen to the story. If you're at Billy Bees, the place at Gathering Mall, Billy Bees, Billy Bees. They know they're going to be loud, they're going to be rambunctious, running, jumping, screaming. Physical motor, they're going to start to improve their fine motor tasks of gripping things like a pencil, writing their names, learning how to do that, working on aspects of clothing themselves, button snap zippers. Socially, they will engage and seek out play with other kids. They might have a lot more imaginative play. Emotionally, when they're dropped off at school or at grandma's house or something like that, they'll be able to calm or soothe themselves when their parents are no longer available. And speech language, you can start to have short conversations, reciprocal conversations. You start understanding and answering the WH type questions like who, what, when, where, why, how. And again, it just increases complexity in speech development. So if we just wanted to look at some of these examples and just think about for kids up to age 5, are some of these things typical or atypical? So if a 3-year-old chases a ball in the street without looking, we think that's typical or atypical. I think that's pretty typical. They're still learning that. A 9-month-old standing with assistance, like grabbing onto the corner of the coffee table and pulling themselves up. Pretty typical. A 5-year-old that will share toys. Yeah, it could go either way. There might be some kids they share with and some that they don't share with, because that's right on my cusp of, really learning and mastering that skill. But I wouldn't say it's atypical to do that. Well, 2-year-old drinking from a sippy cup, typical. And a 4-month-old showing no emotions toward a parent. What do they think? Is that typical or atypical? Atypical. There's probably some, stop crying, smiling, giggling, stuff like that. All right, so then we get into school age years. And again, this is very broad range from 6 to 12. A lot of stuff is happening, right? So to condense it into like one slide is barely the tip of the iceberg. But everything that they've already learned in areas where they've already developed, you're building on that. So the cognitive learning is a lot more abstract, kind of developing a very simple understanding of how the world works. If I don't share my toys, then other kids won't want to share with me. If I'm not nice to kids on the playground, then they're not going to want to play with me. So that's what I mean when I say a very simple understanding of the world. Their attention span might increase, and they have some ability to reason. Again, much different for 6 than it is for 12. So physical and motor, they might be able to do simple chores like really simple work in the dishwasher, things like that. Once you get up to 12, you should be able to do most possible tasks. They can make drawings that are identifiable. They can draw stick figures that represent their family, and you can have a general understanding of what it is that they're drawing. They have self-help skills, brushing their own teeth, getting dressed, understanding, when it's time to get on the school bus. Socially, they have a general understanding and know to follow the rules. So at school, most kids follow the rules associated with school. Yes, there's some that don't. Yes, under certain circumstances, maybe don't. But generally speaking, they understand these are rules and we follow them. Emotionally, again, I think that emotionally, ages 6 to 12 is a very broad range. But they might need support to process complex emotions, things like embarrassment or jealousy, things like that. Happy, sad, mad, they probably got that. They probably have a pretty good understanding of that. They improve their ability to self-regulate and increase their emotional independence, and that's something that just keeps on going through the teen years. And their emotionality is often related to social experiences. So they're starting to, how other people see them and treat them starts to have an impact. And they start to feel that emotional. And speech and language, they can tell stories, improve conversational skills. By the time you get up to 12, a lot of kids might be communicating in a similar fashion to themselves. And they're able to rephrase and summarize. So if they read a short story in school, and you say, what was that story about? They can say in a couple of sentences or a short paragraph what the story was about. All right. So if we look at this school age group, excuse me, if a 6-year-old is playing pretend with their friends, do we think that that's typical or atypical? Oh. Sorry. Again, I think it's pretty typical. Under certain circumstances, could it be atypical? Yeah, but I think at 6, yeah, you can still play pretend, like the floor is locked. That's playing pretend. A 9-year-old that's unable to calm themselves when dropped off at school. I think it's atypical. By 9, they usually have those emotional regulation skills. A 10-year-old who's able to get their own snack after school. Yeah, that's perfectly normal. A 12-year-old who doesn't live when they cross the street. By 12, you should know that. And an 8-year-old who's unable to zip their own jacket. Again, if we're talking about maybe a child with a disability or some kind of physical barrier that doesn't allow them to do that, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking very generally. Okay. And then teenagers, 13 to 18. Yes. Well, they're okay. So in terms of development, I think that we'll still go through this a little more quickly, and then once we get into the what can we do about it kind of stuff, we'll spend more time there because that always seems to be what parents want to know. If I am incorrect, just let me know. So teens and tweens, they're developing those independent living skills. They're able to care for themselves, problem-solving skills, abstract thinking, conflict resolution, and they're looking to find their sense of self and their place in the world, especially as we get more into those young adult years. Motor and physical development, they're looking at puberty, height and weight changes, body hair, menstrual cycle, sexual development, regardless of your child's cognitive abilities. If anyone's listening has a child with a developmental disability, they still experience all the same stuff. Their portrayal of it might be a little different than a child without a disability, but they still have sexual development. They still experience puberty, and that can be very difficult for them to understand and for parents to help those kids through that. Socially, these young people want to separate themselves from caregivers and or all adults, if possible. They'll push limited boundaries. They want to increase their association with their peer group. They might be very defiant or argumentative. They engage in a lot of risk-taking behaviors, some more so than others, and they're very much influenced by their peer group. Emotionally, honestly, anything you can imagine, you can probably put in this category. But some describing words are moody, sensitive, but also passionate, irritable, oppositional. They can be very persuasive, which is a word I like better than manipulative. But I guess ultimately it's a little bit of the same thing. And then speech language again, when you're working on expanding your vocabulary, and you're really able to advocate for yourself, and you can take a side in an argument and be able to defend it in a rational and logical manner. So if we just check on, what's typical or atypical for a teenager, a 16-year-old with an imaginary friend. Most 16-year-olds are. A 14-year-old slamming the door. Typical. Okay, we were all teenagers once, right? We did some of these things. A 15-year-old who cries when they're told to eat their broccoli. I mean, they're probably not crying. They might go in the room and slam the door, but they're probably not going to sit at the dining room table and cry. A 13-year-old that lies to their parents. Yeah. Again, what they're lying about, how often they're lying, that, might be a problem. But if they, didn't do their homework and they told their parents that they did, that's not atypical. And each, that skips school to go to the mall. Do kids go to the mall anymore? Is that a thing? I don't really know. But that wouldn't be an abnormal behavior.
Do you have children?
Maybe. I guess it depends on the household, but I hear what you're saying. But in this example, I'm really talking about like the 15-year-old's inability to control their own emotions in relationship broadly is what I would say is atypical. It might, I guess it depends on the household and what kind of rules they have about eating your vegetables in terms of if you really need to tell a teenager to eat their vegetables. So, I mean, my significant other is, he's going to be 44 next week, and he didn't eat his vegetables yesterday, so. But he's an adult, so he gets that choice, he doesn't have to. So then we're gonna, and this is where we start getting into the nitty-gritty of it. Factors that influence a child's behavior and their behavioral development. So first we start with biology. So your DNA, what happens in utero, during pregnancy, family history, your race, ethnicity, the developmental disability, your cognitive abilities, all of those things are biology. Then there's psychological components. So if you experience trauma or abuse, your ability to be resilient, develop coping skills, your experiences, your ability to problem solve, perseverance. These are things that influence your behavior. Social and emotional, again, we get trauma. Culture by culture might be your culture just within your family, within your household. It could be religious or spirituality that is part of your culture. The way you were raised, the way your grandparents raised your parents, all of these things are impacting a child's behavioral development. Relationships with friends, family, bullying, again, prior experiences. All of these things are going to go into behavioral development. Then we get physical. Diet and exercise is a huge part of physical development. A physical disability, puberty, a chronic illness that maybe was discovered early in life. Environmental factors, hazardous or unsafe living environments, air, water pollution, rural versus urban communities. I see a lot of behavioral differences from kids that live in the city or kids that live in East Aurora, per se. If we're looking at teenagers, it might be more about how kids are relating to other kids or a lot of people in the family or household, whereas other families that I see that live in a more rural setting, it might be more about the kids running off into the woods, and not knowing that it's unsafe to do that without a parent. We're not going to solve that. Yeah. Whereas kids in the city of Buffalo, they're not like, oh, he runs off into the woods. No, if your kid's going to take off, it's probably going to be on the street or in traffic. Unsafe for a different reason. And then economics. So it affects your ability to access resources, doctors, medicine, community services, education, housing. So these are all the things that can influence a child's behavioral development. So what do we think that a kid has control over when it comes to things that influence their behavior? Does a kid have control over their biology? Do they have any control? Some control, no control. They have no control. Okay, your genetics are your genetics, you can't change that. What about psychology? Your ability to cope with situations, be resilient, how you respond to adverse situations. Do you have control over that? I think you have some control. And that some amount of control that you have is probably learned from school, parents, families, friends. What about social emotional factors? Do you have any control over those? Yeah, you have some. Again, maybe you don't have control over who your classmates are, but you have control over who you choose to hang out with outside of school. Physical development, I say you have some control because if, especially like as you get a little older in your developmental years, you could choose to eat ice cream for dinner, or you could choose to eat from. When you're a lot younger, you don't have as much control. Environmental factors, what do I think? Some control, no control, all the control. I say no control as a kid. I guess one could make an argument for some control. But you don't get to pick where you live, you don't get to pick the air quality, the water quality, and then economic, you have no control. So the moral of the story here is that kids have very little control over a lot of stuff that influences their behavior. And think about how frustrating that must be for a kid. When they're like, you want me to control my behavior, you want me to do something differently, but I don't have a lot of control over this stuff. What I actually have control over is very small in the grand scheme of things. And a lot of times, parents that I work with don't necessarily see it that way. But if we don't teach or help a child to learn things like emotional regulation, and then they're in 5th grade, and they don't understand that it's not okay to like punch or shove their peers, I don't know if you can necessarily put a whole lot of blame on that kid who was never taught those skills. So let's focus on what people can control, what parents can control, what kids can control. So you can support healthy behavioral development, and I am seconded this 3 different categories here with communication, how you communicate with your child, their physical health, and their social emotional. So if we're talking about communication, and anything up here that has an asterisk, we're going to get more into. So active listening, there was a small group of even number of people, so I don't know how much we'll be able to do that, so we'll probably skip that. But being an active listener, being responsive and receptive to what your child is saying. If a kid says that they were bullied at school, believe that child. Whether it is their reality or their perception, or if it actually happened, respect what they're saying. Maybe they weren't bullied, and that's their perception when someone else took a toy from them because it was time to go to lunch. But what they were taught at home is that when someone else takes your toy, that's not nice. But this other kid's just trying to be helpful. So what are the circumstances? Being open and honest. Again, being open and honest for what is developmentally appropriate for that child. If a 3-year-old comes up and asks how babies are behaving, you're going to have a much different conversation with that kid than you're going to have with a 15-year-old. The same thing with if there's bad things happening on the news in your community and your child asks about it. It's okay to be open and honest with them in a way that's appropriate. This came up a lot after the shooting last year at Tom's, and how to talk to kids about that. Build trust. By these first 3 things, by being open, honest, being responsive, and receptive, you're going to build trust. Acknowledge and validate. So if someone says, I feel sad today, you don't want to say, no, you don't. Because that's being dismissive of their feeling. You just want to acknowledge, I'm sorry that you're feeling that way. Or validate. Tell me more about that. What's leading to you being sad? So those are types of acknowledging and validating statements. Showing respect, picking and choosing your battles, and using I statements. I have this acronym LAWA. It's something that I used when I used to do a lot of training with crisis services, like crisis intervention type stuff. And listen, acknowledge, validate, and avoid arguments are 4 of the keys to effective communication. Avoiding arguments and picking and choosing your battles is kind of the same. But if you can remember these 4 words, that will help you to improve your communication with your kids. We're just going to skip this. In terms of the active listening. Using I statements. So if your child is trying to process complex emotions, or if you're upset with the actions or behaviors of your kid, it's best to use I statements, and you don't want to assign blame. So your behavior made me mad. Instead, you want to say, I am upset with you. or I feel angry at this behavior. I call it making a sandwich, hamburgers, whatever this is. So you want to start with an I statement, and then you want to put like what happened in the middle, and then you want to kind of finish with I statement. So I feel sad when you take money out of my purse, and I don't want to feel sad. Okay, so you're kind of sandwiching what happened with your I statements, or I feel angry, I guess. Anger would probably be the way to explain what happened. So let's practice some I statements. And these are hard. These are really hard for kids to do. They're also really hard for adults, but as adults, we have a lot more control over our ability to do things. So let's say your kid said they hate you. How could you put that into an I statement sandwich if you want to tell them how you feel? How does it make you feel if your kid tells you they hate you? Let's start with that.
I like to do it when you this, I feel that.
Okay.
So when you say you hate me, I feel unhappy, or, when you I feel.
And I don't want to, like, that's not wrong. It's not a matter of right or wrong. I'm going to tell you why I don't prefer that. Because when you start with what the child did wrong, they might shut off and not hear the rest of what it is that you have to say. So that's why I like to start with how you feel and then end with how you feel. So maybe it hurt my feelings, or my feelings were hurt when you said you hated me, and I would rather feel happy. Trying to think of another example. And again, it's not a matter of right and wrong, it's just a matter of personal preference and some amount of experience, because if you start off with, again, if a child takes your phone and throws it, and you're like, when you threw my phone, they already know, like, whoa, I'm in trouble now, mom or dad's mad at me. They like shut their brain off and they're not able to process the rest of the statement. So if we start with how we feel, it might be more likely to get through. If your teenager came home 2 hours late after curfew, how does that make us feel? No one here has a teenager, but how would we imagine it would make us feel? Yeah, or maybe scared, worried. Okay, when you came home late, would rather feel calm, right? Knowing that you're safe at home in your bed. Stealing money from your purse for the wallet, maybe that made you feel angry when they did that act. You don't want to feel that way. You would rather feel something else. If the child hits you, maybe that makes you feel frustrated or angry or hurt. I guess depending on the age of the child that hit you. If you were riding your bike in the middle of the street, I felt worried, I felt concerned, I felt that it was unsafe. So when we're talking, okay, so that was it, sorry, any questions about the communication piece?
This I message is also I have a big shot
Yes.
on the divorce
Yeah, absolutely.
course class.
Yeah, using I statements with adults is also a good way to communicate how you're feeling, especially about a very difficult, complex situation, and when there's a lot of strong emotions.
I feel with my children because they're so young that I ask them more why they're doing what they're doing instead of doing why.
And what do they say when you ask them why? When you ask your child why they did something, what do they say? So why is a very difficult question for a kid to answer. So if I asked you why you're wearing that shirt, but like maybe it was clean and all your other stuff was dirty, right? Maybe it was the first thing that you saw when you opened your closet, maybe, right? But if you get down to the real nitty gritty of like, why that shirt on this day? Why maybe, like, I don't know, maybe that's your favorite color. Maybe there's some kind of reason you don't really comprehend. You're just like, oh yeah, I want to wear this today. It's very cozy. right? Asking a kid a question like that is going to confuse them. They don't know why a lot of the time, so what I like to ask our child is what came before. Before you told your dad that you hated him, like what happened? What came before that? Before you pushed your sister, what came before that? What happened before that? And that's going to help you to understand the why. So if they pushed their sister because she took their toy, okay, so it was a matter of sharing, turn taking, things like that. If what came before that was, I don't know, I was playing with this other thing and I decided I wanted that one, we're looking at different kinds of things going on here between siblings, whereas one might just be button pushing, trying to be mean. I want my little sister to have this, not because I want to play with it, just because I don't want her to have it. And another one might just be a little bit of, teaching about what's appropriate for sharing and what my turn, your turn means. It doesn't mean you get to take whatever you want when you want it because it's all of a sudden your turn. But yeah, using I think is definitely appropriate for adults. The second thing that we could do to support healthy behavioral development is about physical health. Parents can control a lot of aspects of physical health as it comes to sleep hygiene. Sleep hygiene is just a fancy word for having a good sleep routine, going to bed at a reasonable time, getting up at a reasonable time, sleeping in an environment that's an appropriate temperature, that's comfortable, that's cozy, that's safe, free from distractions. Diet and nutrition, I'm not a dietitian, so we're not going to get into that, but eat broccoli. Exercise. Exercise doesn't even have to mean like you're going out and you're playing sports all the time. It might mean getting up and moving around the house. It might mean having playtime. It might mean doing chores. It might mean having playtime outside. Exercise doesn't have to be a sport. It can just be movement. Well, child visits, taking your kid to see their pediatrician, as appropriate for that child's development and medical history. Screen time, we'll talk more about in a minute, because that's a big one. And then household and environmental hazards that you have some amount of control over, and I just put this in here just as a quick reference. So lead and radon are two things that can very seriously affect a child's development, and it is preventable. There's a couple of resources here from New York State Department of Health, Erie County Lead Program, and the full radon map for Erie County. But I was very interested to see that East Aurora on here is in the red zone, which is this over 60% are over the limit of what's considered safe in East Aurora. So especially if you have an older house, probably get radon testing done because it can affect your child's physical health and development. I'm in the process of buying a house right now, so I just went through a radon test. But when I looked up the map, I was like, oh, look at East Aurora. It's right. I don't know why, I'm not a scientist. But I did bring a couple of brochures and handouts about radon and lead, especially if your house is an older house, which there's a lot of in Western New York. That is very important, and there are a lot of programs in the county that can help with replacing or updating stuff in your house if there is lead. But that's a huge part of physical development that we have control over. Okay, screen time. How many people's kids have a Nintendo, a Wii, a DS, an Xbox, a 360, a laptop, a computer, a Chromebook, a desktop, a TV, anything else I'm missing? An iPad, a phone, okay? So, based on what is the American Academy, I should say Association of Pediatrics, this is their recommended screen time limits. Kids birth to 2 years, they shouldn't have none. There was a little asterisk or caveat, like if they're FaceTiming with a family member or relative who lives on the other side of the planet, like that's okay because that's helping them to build their communication skills. But for kids under 2 years, they're not recommended to have any recreational screen time. 2 to 5 years, an hour or less, 6 to 10, 1.5 or less, 11 to 13, 2 or less, 14 and up and vary. And this is for non-educational use of screens. During COVID, right, everybody was on their screen. Like my iPad has a screen time tracker. When COVID was, everything was in lockdown. It's like your screen time's up 87%. Holy goodness, right? But a lot of that was work related, education related. But if we look at pros and cons of screen time and how it affects a child's development, there are pros and cons. There's pros and cons to most everything. So some of the pros: easy access to information. You're concerned about your kids' health and wellness, you can go online, look stuff up, educate. A family member who's in Afghanistan as part of, the United States military. You have the ability to communicate with these devices. That's not something like when I was a kid, we didn't have that. But some of the cons is it can slow language development if you're not having that near frequent interaction with peers, parents, siblings, and you're just watching videos. It can slow language development. It can interfere with your social development. You might see how other people on TV or on YouTube interact, but you're not experiencing the same level of interaction as you would if you were on the screen. And it can increase the tendency to have a sedentary lifestyle, which is going to, again, affect your physical health and wellness. So based on these screen time limits in the American Academy, the Association of Pediatrics, there's some tips that we can do to address screen time concerns. Parental controls. Every device has parental controls. If you don't like the parental controls on your device, you can download apps that have, or you can buy software with parental controls. So you can have the device turned off at a specific time. That way you're making the device the bad guy and not the parent. If you're like, okay, 8 o'clock, device is off, your kid has a tantrum, they don't want to turn it off, they don't want to stop watching their, what is that thing all the kids watch, the fingernails and the sounds? What's it called?
Oh,
AM. Yeah, it's like 4 letters, I forget what it's called. ASMR?
Yeah.
Is that what it is? It drives me nuts. They want to keep watching their ASMR, and now they're throwing a fit, and that just delays bedtime, and they'll keep brushing and bath time and all that. Set your parental control so it shuts off automatically at 8 p.m. Device is the bad guy, not so much the parent. And it decreases those power struggles. Content moderation, what they have access to, what they don't have access to, types of activities. There are parental control systems out there where it's like from 3 to 5, you can only access these applications, these websites that are for educational purposes. And from 7 to 8 p.m., you can access your video games and stuff like that. So there's a lot of different types of parental controls out there. There's a really good website called Common Sense Media, and I believe it's in the resources at the end of the PowerPoint. It has a lot of really good information about what are some of the best educational apps, what are some of the best parental control programs, stuff like that. Set house rules that everybody follows: mom, dad, sister, brother, everybody. So if no devices after a certain time, no devices at the kitchen table, no devices before school, whatever it is, enforce it for everybody. Kids model and copy other people, parents, siblings. So if it's why can my sister have it and I can't, how are you? Well, they're older, they're more, they have this, they have that. No, these rules are going to apply to everyone. Time limit, maybe it's a total time per day or next time per usage. If you find that your child is getting overstimulated, watching a lot of YouTube videos for more than 20 minutes at a time, then set a time limit for 15 minutes. And they can have 15 minutes at a time, 15 minutes off, 15 minutes on, 15 minutes off. That's what's going to work for your child. Providing alternatives. I can't tell you how many times I would try to be independently wealthy. And every time it's like, but there's nothing else to do when you take away the tablet. So give them some alternatives. What else is available? Instead of just saying, okay, no more tablets, say like, hey, here's your choices of 2 different activities. And then structure time. If there's not a lot of structure between getting out of school and going to bed, then you're just gonna sit there and watch YouTube or play games. So is there a family game night? Is there a community activity? Is there a club that you can get involved in? Are there arts and crafts time at home? Like whatever it is that you can do to help that child structure their time is gonna decrease their amount of screen time. Maybe part of that structure is an hour of screen time, and that's fine. Or movie night with your family or things like that. But the more structured time, the less idle and the less likely they're going to be to become addicted ultimately to screens. Any questions, comments, anything about screen time? There is scientific research, which isn't included in here, but you can find it online. As I found you go online, I'll look something down. That shows how screen time affects a child's brain development. And they compare that like current generations of young people to older generations, people know what they know about brain development. And there is definitely a correlation between current brain development and how people's brains developed prior to the kind of technology that we have. Okay. Now, our last big category that we're going to talk about today is social emotional, which is a huge area for behavioral development. Most of the challenging behaviors that I see in the course of my work are related to kids that cannot manage their own emotions. And it comes out, it presents itself in the way of disruptive behavior. So how can we support our own kids' social emotional development? So this list, I'm not going to read them all, everyone here can read. But this is just a handful of ways, of topics related to social emotional development. What's great is a lot of, I think every school now probably has some kind of social emotional learning curriculum, but that doesn't stop at school. It needs to carry on into the home, which is why parent resources and groups and stuff like we have here are so helpful, because it helps to communicate some of what is happening at school into the home. And unfortunately, in 2023, we have most households probably, if there's 2 parents present, both parents are working, maybe working multiple jobs, and it's hard to be physically present and mentally present to the degree that a child might need to develop an effective set of social emotional skills. But when we are trying to teach our kids these things, like how can we do that? What's available? So having a variety of opportunities available for socialization and recreation. So it's not just TV is babysitter, right? When I was a kid, the TV was babysitter, maybe it's the iPad, but get involved in a club, get involved in a community activity. Every town, city, municipality has a parks and recreation department, youth departments within their local government that provide some amount of opportunities. Your local YMCA. So even if you are in a household where parents maybe aren't always present, there's still ways to help your children get those socialization and recreation opportunities. Like we talked about, the communication, respect, acknowledge, and validate how your kid is feeling, and express how you're feeling. In a household where there is an open and honest sharing of emotions, those children are more likely to develop healthy social emotional skills later in life. Model the appropriate behavior, because kids are going to copy. They're going to see what a parent does, and they're going to do the same. So if when they get your order wrong at Burger King, if you're cussing out the cashier at Burger King, that's going to teach your child that it's okay, and that when a small thing goes wrong, they have a big problematic behavior. Let children solve their own problems, again, within the spectrum of what's developmentally appropriate. If your 5-year-old is mad that their teenage sibling can drive a car and they can't, don't be like, okay, go figure it out, learn how to drive, okay? That's not going to be appropriate. But if they're like, oh, my friend's mad at me because I drove his toy car, okay, well, how do you think you can, problem solve that with your friend? Kids are able to problem solve in ways that they're not always allowed to because parents will try to solve the problems for them. It's okay for kids to make mistakes and to learn from them. Parents need to let go of self-control. There's a lot of things that parents want to take control of that they don't have to. If your kid wants to shower at night instead of in the morning, doesn't matter. In the grand scheme of things, doesn't matter as long as they're taking a shower. There's a lot of parents who have teenagers who might be like, oh my goodness, I would do anything for them to willingly take a shower without it being a fight. So let go of some of that control. Provide choices. If they have to do a chore every day, give them choices of what those chores are. Create opportunities for family bonding. Be reliable and consistent. Set rules, limits, and boundaries, and follow through on those and enforce them. And the consequences should match. And we're going to get into that in a second. Let kids be responsible for their own actions, choices, and behaviors. They don't study for a test and they get a bad grade, then it's up to them to go to the teacher and say, hey, is there any extra credit? That's not the parent's job to try to do that for the kid. Let them be responsible for their own actions and behaviors. And provide an environment that is physically and psychologically safe. When we say physically safe, that means, all the doors have locks, the windows are, it's not full of hazardous chemicals, it's not fire hazard, psychologically safe. It's not an emotionally or physically abusive situation. Okay, so let's get a little bit more into giving choices. Okay, so just talk about the showering or bathing, right? Big shower or bath, doesn't matter. Okay, if it's in the morning or at night, doesn't matter. Okay, if we're talking about a younger kid, then everybody in the house has to have a chore. Maybe it's, you have to scoop the cat litter or feed the dog every day. Maybe it's you have to empty or fill the dishwasher. Doesn't matter which one, they both have to be done. So give the child some sense of control over what they're doing. Maybe for some reason they really don't like filling the dishwasher and they'd rather empty it. They both get done, doesn't matter. Homework. If your kids have homework, some kids don't, but it doesn't matter if they do it before or after dinner, as long as it gets done, right? Doesn't matter. So give them some choices. Consequences. So let's say you set a rule. Your teenager has to be home by 9 p.m. But on this particular day, they arrive home at 9:15 p.m. The consequence should match. So maybe the next day, they have to be home 15 minutes early. Maybe they took 15 of your minutes, but you sat at home stressing out, where's my kid, so they owe you 15 minutes back. So maybe they have to do something for you back in your car. Right? Try to pick something that matches. You're not going to say like, oh, you came home 15 minutes late, so you're grounded for a month. Okay, now that child feels like, well, there's no hope for the next month. I'm not going to get to go out and see my friends again until April. So why should I do what I'm supposed to do today? Why should I follow the rules? They have no reason to, because it is a big consequence. Okay, maybe you have a rule that they have to do their homework before they can go outside and play. They said their homework was done, but it wasn't. Right? So maybe now, before they go out and play, the parent has to check to make sure all the homework's done. Most kids don't want their parents to check their homework, but maybe that's what has to be done. Or if you have a rule about not devices at the dinner table, and your kids sitting there texting under the table playing a game, maybe they have to turn in their phone. No, they can't have it back until after dinner. So have consequences that match. and follow through. Don't be like, oh, this one time, we're not going to enforce the school, or, oh, don't call your brother, or, because what's happening there is you're teaching your kids that the rules and the expectations that you set don't matter. You're taking away your own power and control. You're taking away your ability to set rules and expectations for your kids that you want them to follow because you're undermining yourself. All right, learning from mistakes. Here's just a couple of examples, and they're very, very basic. So, Kelly touches the hot stove, despite parents saying, Kelly, don't touch it hot, you're going to get burned. So what happens? Kelly gets burned. Okay, so Kelly learned from her mistakes, and she does stop touching the hot stove. Okay, so let's say Mike refuses to share his toys with Emma. And then Mike meets this new kid, Sam. He's like, hey, you want to play? Let's share. And Sam's like, no, I'm not sharing with you. You're me. Okay, so he's going to learn from his mistakes. Where Charlie doesn't study for his test. Charlie gets a bad grade. Charlie gets to stay after school for extra credit. What does Charlie learn? He learns to study for his next test, so he doesn't have to stay after school for extra credit. Is that what?
I'm from Germany, is that you need to stay here after school?
It's an example. Some schools might say like, oh, well, if you stay after and help me with this project, or if you stay here and you do this other extra task or assignment, I don't know. Again, maybe I'm dating myself, showing my age. Maybe they give you an extra assignment to take home to do extra credit. The point is that the kid has to use the time that they would probably rather doing something fun to, get extra points so that they get a better grade in the class. So, they don't make kids stay after school agreement? No. Is that still a thing? Do kids stay after school?
They went in middle school, they don't stay after they
Oh, okay.
complete an assignment.
Oh, okay. Then like detention, is that still a thing? Okay. Do you know what detention is? No, okay. Interesting. I'd be interested to learn more about that. So problem solving. So problem solving, whether you're a kid, adult, whether you're 5 years old or 50 years old, the steps of problem solving are always the same. And you can go through these 5 steps with anybody of any age. And let me go through a few examples. And these are good things. So a 15-year-old. So what if they come home and they say, oh, we did this group project and I'm doing all the work. How can they go through the problem solving process to learn how to solve their own problem? Right? So they can identify the problem. They're doing all the work. So there's 3 other group members, nobody's doing anything. Okay, so they can gather information. So there's 3 other kids in the group, and one's really good at this, and one's really good at that, one's really good at this. So maybe that's how we can break it to work, and then maybe people will be more likely to complete their portion of the project. So if you weigh the pros and cons, well, maybe, I don't know, this is very, very vague, hypothetical. Yeah, but Sally's gonna be on vacation, so that's not gonna work, so maybe that's a con, right? And then ultimately, after you weigh all your options, you have to make a choice. Or maybe in this example, this 15-year-old decides to talk to the teacher about other people in the group not doing their share of work. There are choices, there are pros and cons, there are possible solutions. Let's explore what those are and make a choice about what we're going to do about this problem. Okay, so a 7-year-old, he gets invited to 2 different friends' birthday parties on the same day at the same time. Oh no. If a parent picks for this kiddo, and the child doesn't have a good time, they might be really mad. They might be like, oh, I should have went to Billy's party instead. That would have been way more fun. So let's gather the information. Where are the 2 parties at? Have we been there before? Was it really fun? Are there other solutions? Can we go like half of one and half of the other? Right? But if it's a situation that maybe doesn't matter what the kid decides to do, then that's an opportunity to let the kiddo learn how to solve his own problem and make their own choice. And that's going to empower them, and it's going to teach them some very critical social emotional skills. An 18-year-old can decide what college to go to. an 11-year-old who saw a classmate steal. All of these situations can go through this process. Parents can go through this process with their kids, and they're going to learn something. And that's going to help them with all of their behavioral development later on. So I like this visual just for an example of different parenting styles. So authoritative, authoritarian, permissive, and uninvolved. So we have high levels of warmth, low levels of warmth, high levels of control, low levels of control. I don't think there's any parent who is watching or paying attention right now that's uninvolved or else you participating. So if we just glance at the other three and what some highlights of those parenting styles. Most experts will agree that the authoritative is going to be the best case scenario, because even though the parent is in charge and the parent-child relationship is very evident of that, it allows room for flexibility, compromise, assertiveness, for just being supportive, while also setting high but reasonable and attainable expectations. Sometimes people say like, oh, I always forget the difference between authoritarian and authoritative. I always say like, just make the V a heart. So it comes down like a little heart, and just be like, oh yeah, that's the ideal. I need little places like that to remember things sometimes. So I'm always like, oh yeah, authoritative is the V, it's like the bottom of the heart. So as we get to teens and young adults, there's some really important language that I like to talk to parents about when it comes to understanding teen development and teen behavior. And the most important of those is the dignity of risk, the idea of dignity of risk, which is the idea that self-determination and taking reasonable risks are required, are an essential part of self-esteem and youth development. So kids, teenagers will do things to exercise that dignity of risk because they're trying to achieve self-determination, dignity, and self-esteem. So self-determination is a process by which you feel like you have control over your own life. And dignity is the sense of pride in yourself. Feel like you're worthy of respect, of love, of having other people respect you, of respecting yourself. And then self-esteem is the confidence in your own sense of self-worth. So whenever your teenager does something and you just kind of facepalm and like, oh my goodness, why would they do something so stupid? They know better than that, right? Because they're constantly trying to achieve these things. They're trying to show that they can take risks and successfully deal with the outcome, whether that's a social emotional outcome, a physical outcome, a emotional, we already said, whatever it is, they can deal with it. They have control over their own life, and these things are important so that they can grow and develop into healthy young adults. So if your teenager gets in a car, they don't have a license, they decide they're going to drive their friend's car, and if you know they know better, but they do it anyways. It's them trying to show that they have some amount of control over their own life. To show that regardless of the mistakes or silly things that they do, that they have this sense of self, and these risks that they take are essential for exercising that and to proving to the rest of the world that they are their own person. It doesn't make sense when before you get to that stage. It doesn't make a lot of sense after you develop past that stage. But when you're in that moment in your development, that's the thing that seems most important to you. So that's what you're going to do. Whether it's for peer pressure, for laughs from your friends, to impress a boy or girl that you like. It seems silly, but in that moment, that's what matters to those kids, and that's what they're going to do. So these are some, I think, very important concepts when we're looking at teenagers and young adults, to help understand and explain some of their behaviors. And hopefully, as parents, what we can do is support them through that challenging process and help them develop enough to the point that some of the risks that they take, or most of the risks that they take, aren't going to endanger themselves or others, but they will take them regardless of how much they're taught, how much social and emotional development they have. Every young person will experience that, and parents, it's really just to be supportive of that process, without the need for punitive kind of responses, and by trying to remember that we were all there once, and we kind of understand, even though it's a lot different now for kids than it was when I was a kid. I know that, I think people online is looking for information on a different age group than the people in front of us. So if we have, and I don't know how much time, how many people want to say, if you have questions, comments, if you want to talk about your own child and your own situations, I usually will tell people I will stay if people have their own issues with their child behavior that they want to talk about. I also have cards. If people don't want to stay, but want to shoot me an email, email is the best way to contact me. Some people don't want to share maybe concerns about their child behavior in front of everybody, so you can definitely send me an email. I will respond. And there are, in the last couple slides, there are some resources. The links, if you wrote your name on the assignment sheet, I can email to you, so you can actually have the links. But is there anything else, questions, comments, and some people that want to get out of this, or maybe they didn't get? Anything? And it's not interactive online, right? It's just a live stream. Okay. So, well, on the first slide, I have my contact information. So if anybody online wants to shoot me an email, that is perfectly okay too. There are evaluations also. I think you two ladies did not get them, but if you could please fill them out, I will give them to you. And if you'd like more information about parent network trainings or training opportunities for parents or professionals, you can contact Emily. She is our training coordinator, and she would be more than happy to set that up for you guys. Anything else? Questions, comments? Anyone? Okay. Thank you. You can